How a woodworker looks at trees. This presentation will concentrate more on trees than the wood they produce, and that knowledge will make you a better woodworker. In order to appreciate the properties of wood and how it's worked and finished, it's worthwhile to understand something of the way a tree grows. The more you know about how a tree grows, the more you will understand what makes some woods better than others for a specific project. A typical tree has a trunk, leaf-bearing branches, and a root system. We will look at all of these in detail as we proceed. The trunk, it supports the branches. It also carries sap from the roots to the branches. And it's the main support system for the tree itself. The branches support the leaves or needles. It also carries nutrients from the leaves to the rest of the tree. The leaves are needles. They produce nutrients by photosynthesis. And they absorb carbon dioxide from the air, and they give off oxygen to the air. The roots anchor the tree in the ground, and they absorb water and minerals from the ground. Now, wood is a mass of tubular cellulose cells bonded together with an organic chemical called lignin. These cells have been compared to a bunch of soda straws that have been glued together, just on a much larger scale. Now, these cells provide support for the tree, circulation of sap, and for food storage. There are 8 different major parts of a tree, and we will look at each one of them separately. The pith. It's the central core of the cells, and it's often weak and it suffers from fungal attacks. And as a general rule, the pith is not usable to the woodworker. Now, the heartwood is the mature wood that forms the spine of the tree. And it's that heartwood that actually keeps the tree upright. The heartwood is the most desirable part of the tree for the woodworker. It can often be darker in color than the sapwood. And essentially, heartwood is dead sapwood. Now, the sapwood is the new wood, the cells of which conduct or store nutrients. Sapwood is the living part of the tree. On some trees, the sapwood layer is thin. On others, it's wide. On some trees, it's the same color as the heartwood. On others, it's lighter in color. And often this difference is what makes that particular wood from that particular tree either desirable or not so much. The relation between the sapwood and the heartwood often is at the heart of the choice that you make for the wood for a specific project. Now, the cambium layer is it's a thin layer of living cell tissue that forms the new wood and the bark. Now, the cambium layer is it's where both sapwood and heartwood, or excuse me, bark is created. Uh, this is where the new cells are formed, and it's just that thin layer that's between the sapwood and the bark. Now, growth rings, it's a layer of wood that is formed in one growing period, usually in one given year. It's usually um, a larger early wood section and a smaller late wood section. And this makes up the annual growth ring. Generally speaking, the early wood is a lighter color, the late wood is a darker color. The early wood section is normally bigger than the late wood section. Now, ray cells are very interesting. They're radiating sheets of cells that conduct nutrients horizontally. Uh, these ray cells uh, can be of particular interest to a woodworker when the log is quarter sawn. It produces, in some cases, incredible grain that cannot be produced by cutting the tree in any other way. Now, the phloem or bast, it's uh, the inner bark tissue, and it actually conducts synthesized food up and down. It's that usually slimy uh, part of the tree that would be between the bark and the cambium layer. And the bark itself is just the outer protective layer. It's dead cells. Um, Sometimes you can utilize bark in woodworking. Most of the time, not so much. Now, early wood and late wood. The way a tree grows depends on climatic conditions. In a temperate climate, there's generally rapid growth in the spring, less growth in the summer, and no new growth in the winter. Early wood is the part of the annual growth ring that's laid down in the early part of the growing season. The late wood is the part of the annual ring that develops in the latter part of the growing season, and it produces thicker walled cells, creating a denser and usually darker wood. And it's less able to conduct sap, but it aids in supporting the tree. So you get more of the cells in the early wood, and you get more fiber in the late wood. And it's this difference in the two portions of the growing season that produces the grain in the wood. Now, ring porous wood, it's a distribution of hardwood cells that have a marked effect on the texture of the wood. Ring porous hardwoods such as oak or ash have clearly defined rings of larger vessels in the early wood and the dense fibers and cell tissue in the late wood. Um, this is what creates the difference in texture um, in a wood. Oak has a more rustic feel to it than, say, maple. Um, and this is what causes that difference, is the larger cells that's in the early wood and fewer cells and more fiber in the late wood. Now, diffuse porous wood is just the opposite. In this wood, such as beech and maple, the vessels and fibers are distributed relatively evenly. Although wood, like mahogany, is often diffuse porous, it has larger cells, so it has a coarse texture. But technically, mahogany is a diffuse porous wood. And because of this difference in the grain of the wood that's produced between the diffuse porous and the ring porous woods, it can make a big difference on how you select the wood for the project. If you're doing, say, a jewelry box and you want a fine, elegant appearance, you would probably not pick oak. But on the other hand, if you were building a desk or a cabinet where you wanted it to be more rustic, then oak would be a good choice. So depending on what kind of texture you want, it's going to make a difference whether you choose a diffuse porous wood for that project or a ring porous wood. Now, what does all this have to do with woodworking? For instance, by knowing that pepper burl is prone to move a lot while it's drying, you can predict what you will end up with when you turn it green. You'll notice on this piece all of the openings and all of the wrinkles occurred while it was drying, not while it was being turned. Now, normally you don't include the pith in anything, but if you want to take full advantage of the knots in Norfolk Island pine, then you need to include the pith. This piece was turned from the entire log. That allows the knots to appear in the piece radially. You can't get this effect any other way. Now, in the case of a lidded box, it's important that the wood not move over time, or you can lose the tight fit that you produced on the lid when you turned it. Now, by using the knowledge of how wood grows and reacts, you can make the best choice for wood for every project and achieve better results.